In this short video, we're just going to talk about ontology and epistemology. So as a quick reminder, if you've not watched the first video, what are ontology and epistemology? Well, ontology and epistemology refer to philosophical branches that describe the fundamental assumptions that we often bring to our research. Ontology is just the word that's used to describe what we assume there is out there in the real world for us to know about. What is the makeup of the reality that we are trying to understand, that we're trying to produce knowledge of when we're producing evidence, whether that is through research, or even if you think about it in the context of clinical practice. What are the things that you're trying to understand about a client that you may be working with, such as an athlete? Epistemology then refers to how we actually go about producing that knowledge. So whilst ontology tells us what there is, or at least it refers to the assumptions we make about what there is to know about, epistemology refers to how we go about producing knowledge of that reality. These are incredibly important things that often go completely unstated or unconsidered by most researchers or applied practitioners. This quote by Schwartz sums it up nicely as well. In it, he notes the practice of science depends on a set of metaphysical, and here you can read that as being ontological, and epistemological commitments that are so commonplace that they rarely rise to the level of explicit consideration or discussion, at least among scientists. Most scientists do not pay any attention to this, despite the fact that they do implicitly hold assumptions regarding ontology and epistemology. And these assumptions logically precede the work that can be done in terms of applying scientific methods to produce data that we can then draw conclusions from. Ontology forms the foundation about what we can know about. Epistemology refers to how we can go about knowing it. Methodology refers to the study of the different techniques and methods we can use within that epistemology to then go about producing knowledge. And then methods merely refers to the specific procedures or techniques that we can use to actually collect data from the sources that we try to produce knowledge from. Now, each of these can be broken down into some key philosophical positions or traditions within science. And each of them take different assumptions regarding the ontological and epistemological commitments that they make. So, for example, the philosophical tradition broadly referred to as positivism takes the following commitments. They take a commitment of realism when it comes to their ontology, and they take a commitment of what is called objectivism when it comes to their epistemology. They also make the assumption that causes, so-called, are merely just the words that we use to describe the patterns of constant or constant conjunction of events that we empirically observe. So the positivists take the following commitments, and let's break those down. So their ontological commitment of realism is that there is indeed a real mind-independent reality that we can produce knowledge of. And their epistemological commitment is one of objectivism, merely that we can produce objective knowledge purely through empirical observation. In fact, the positivists tried to distill meaningful statements as being those that are either logically true, such as all unmarried men are bachelors, which is tautologically true by definition, or those that can be empirically verified. So statements which can be verified by reference to empirical observations that we make. They believed that such things could produce objective knowledge about the world, and they focused on the empirical level of observation. In the tradition of constructivism, contrastingly, they take an ontological commitment of anti-realism. Now, that's not to necessarily say that they believe that there is no mind-independent reality, but merely that the reality that we actually access and can know about is merely the one that is constructed through our own personal experiences. It is not possible for us to actually access reality as it is, but reality is, for us, experience. And so their ontological commitment is one that all of the knowledge that we produce is merely about our experiences of the world. As a result, this logically leads to a subjectivist epistemological commitment. The fact that there is not one truth, but that there are potentially many truths, and that we can produce knowledge of these varying truths, and that knowledge is indeed fallible, that it is subject to revision. Lastly, we have what is known as the critical realist tradition. The critical realists take a realist ontological commitment, as the name suggests, but they combine this with a subjectivist ontological commitment. So the critical realist considers that there really is a mind-independent reality for us to know about, but that the means by which we go producing knowledge of that does not produce objective knowledge. We can aim to try and get as close to objective truth as possible, but it will always be subject to revision. We are always fallible in our tendencies to produce knowledge about reality. Now, the constructivists, to come back to the analysis of causes, they, instead of considering merely the empirical relations between events that we observe as being just patterns, they consider that any analysis of causes is merely a reference to mental models. They're just, again, convenient ways that we construct explanations for what we observe out in the empirical world with reference to our experiences of it. The critical realists, however, do take a realist stance with regards to causes. They believe that there really are mechanisms or tendencies that underlie the phenomena that we observe, that we infer from the empirical data that we collect. I would encourage you to take a read of the chapter that I will put on the Soul page, which goes into far more detail about each of these key philosophical traditions, their ontological commitments, their epistemological commitments, and how they conceive of causes within science, particularly as it pertains to the development of scientific theories. In the workshop, we are going to be going through an exercise where I'll give you some examples of an area of scientific debate and theory, and get you to think about the ontological commitments that you make with respect to that theory.